Welcome back to the TrailBLAZER Pod. I'm your host, Faye, and each week I bring you stories of Jewish women who are trailblazers. Jacki Edry is the author of Moving Forward, Reflections on Autism, Neurodiversity, Brain Surgery, and Faith. In this episode, she isn't just sharing her story, she's challenging the way we think about treatment, disability, and healing. Join me as we explore Jacki's journey of raising neurodivergent children and surviving a brain tumor that profoundly impacted her sensory and processing abilities. Let's dive in. Jacki, welcome to the TrailBLAZER Pod. Thanks so much for being here. How are you today?
Thank God, I'm okay. I'm very honored to be here. It's a pleasure. I'm
Honored to have you.
excited.
We
Thank you.
met through one of the Jewish networking groups and we had a little Zoom coffee chat and we connected right away. And I loved everything you told me and your story was so inspiring. And then I read your book. I read your whole book, which was amazing. But we're going to basically talk through the stuff that you discuss in the book and share your story. I want to start by asking you, curious, where and how did you grow up and how did Judaism play a role, if it did at all?
Okay, so I grew up in Great Neck, Long Island, New York. Um, there was actually quite a number of fairly Jewish town. I'd say at that time there were probably about 80%. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's quite a large Jewish population in the city. My family was not religious in any way, shape, or form. It was more like a cultural thing. We were proud Jews, but didn't really know what that meant to be a proud Jew. The Jewish part about it.
Yeah.
We celebrated Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and Hanukkah and Passover. The Pesach, the bread was in the freezer, kind of thing.
Yeah.
A typical, I think, New York Jew that was a cultural Jew at the time, but there was no religious aspect to Judaism other than knowing that my great grandparents
Right.
were religious, but that was pretty much it.
Yeah. What were you like as a little girl?
Oh, what was I like as a little girl? I think it was a little different. I never was a typical thinker. I was kind of always, yeah, the very non-linear type of
Mm-hmm.
person, kind of a spacey when I was young, which as I got older
Yeah.
was kind of, I thought I was activist, as a creative thinker. Didn't like traditional education. Always was in alternative education, with the exception of junior high, which I hated. Even college was alternative college. That was
Wow.
I like to learn what I like to learn and what I was
Yeah.
interested in, and I didn't like traditional settings
Yeah.
for.
Which is interesting now that we know what your book was all about. I think it all makes sense. We'll get into that in a second. But I know
Okay,
you were initially interested in becoming a vet, right? You loved animals. Was
right.
that always something that you always connected to animals?
I've always connected to animals, and don't be surprised if for some reason my two dogs that are staring at me right now bark in the middle of our conversation. Which, forgive me
I
for.
relate to that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, they do tend to embarrass me at very unlikely and
They're very
inconsiderate
welcome.
times. But yeah, so I was definitely, from the time I was very young, wanted to be a vet,
Wow.
and kind of that kept that with me until midway until university. And when I switched around and
Yeah. I'm
decided
just
to.
curious, like now knowing that you felt a little bit different as a kid, do you think that that's why you connected so strongly to animals?
Calm and loyal
Yeah.
and caring, and
Unconditional.
I had quite a turbulent childhood in terms of my family situation, and animals were certainly
Yeah.
just always pure love.
Yeah.
And my dogs, as I was growing up, were like my definitely sanity and my safe place for
Yeah.
sure.
I
Plus,
totally
I
get it.
think that, I mean, now I can say it as a religious woman, that God creates beautiful creatures, and animals are pure and loving. But I mean, I've always been, nature was always the place where I could get peace of mind. Put me in a bit of a forest and with a
Yeah.
book, and let me sit all alone and wait for the deer to walk by, and that was my peace of mind
Yeah.
as I was growing up.
Wow.
So yeah.
So you did mention now that you're a religious woman. So can you walk me through like when that relationship to Judaism changed and how?
It was a very, very long process. I guess I had a spark in me that I did not know how to. how to put a name to it, where I always felt restless and uncomfortable. And I was always looking for something, and I would volunteer in all kinds of projects and organizations, and I was doing all kinds of stuff, but I was never at peace with myself. Like I said, I had no idea what I was looking for.
Right.
And then I made a promise to myself that I would go to Israel one day. I was just curious. And actually, it's kind of funny because in high school, all my friends just say, "Oh, if you go to Israel, you're never going to come back." And I always laugh about that because I mean, I
Foreshadow.
was curious. So I decided when I finished college, I would go. So I went to a summer program. I was here for maybe a week, and it was a non-religious kibbutz. And then these two soldiers from Golani were there, and they said to me, "Oh, yeah, you seen Jerusalem?" And I said, "No, so let's take you." So it was like the middle of the night. And in those days, it was over 30 years ago, it was kind of okay to go to Jerusalem at night near the old city. And I step out the car and I look at the walls, were all golden. And I just go, "Oh, I'm home."
Oh.
And my ears hear what my mouth said. And I said, "That's interesting. I wonder why I said that." Because I really just came out
Yeah.
my mouth. And I guess that was my soul talking. In any case,
Wow.
from that moment, something switched in my head. So I was like, okay, well, I'm just going to ignore that, right? And I went back to New York, and I got a job in an advertising agency and doing all the things a young woman,
Yeah.
successful in Manhattan. And I was restless. I was just restless. And after like 7 months, I said, okay, that's it. I just bought a one-way ticket to Israel. I said, I
Wow.
have to learn something. I don't know what it is, but I have to finish learning something. And I had a backpack, and I had $500 and a plane ticket. And
So
that was the
brave.
start of it. And as time went on, I met my husband a number of years later. And this is what's Ashgaha, God oversees the world, and nothing happens for randomly.
Yeah.
So I really believe that everything that happens is part of his master plan, and it slowly unfolds to us. Anyway, so my husband was born to a religious family in Morocco, came here at 2 months old. So me, American self from non-religious background, meets at work. We worked with at-risk youth. I've been in Israel for several years, and I met him at work. And so he's got that background, and I've got mine, but we connected. The same core values were there. And slowly over the years, I learned more about what that meant. I just kept getting things happening like that would prove to me that something was overseeing, God was overseeing the world. And that kind of woke me up and said, well, okay, if so, and if I'm a Jew, and it's very rare to be a Jew, very small percentage of the population is Jew, then I got to find out what that means. It's not just a culture, it's a religion. What does that mean? So I started exploring. In college, I started working in high school, I started working with autistic kids. And then in college, I switched and did my thesis on educating autistic kids. And then a number of years later, my son was born, and he turns out that he's autistic. It's like that knowledge is what I needed to help him and myself at that point, because we both would have been nuts if we would have done things traditionally in terms of the common treatments for autism. So it was like proof over and over and over again that everything happens for a reason and everything unfolds. And that really is what strengthened me along the way.
Wow.
And as I started performing more mitzvot and living a religious lifestyle, that restlessness that I had all those years dissipated.
Wow.
And that was like a miracle, because I'd always been restless.
Wow. I just find it's so beautiful, because when you read through your book, it's so clear that really like faith is what kept you going, right?
Oh, yeah.
And I just find it amazing knowing your background and where you came from, and it took so much work to get to that place of faith and all that stuff. So I think just amazing how it all works and comes together at some point. You did mention though autism. I want to get into that a little bit. I shared with you when we chatted that I always loved working with children who had special needs, whether that was autism or Down syndrome, and it's just like one of the most special things I've ever had the privilege of being a part of. And I used to volunteer at Camp Hask and with Friendship Circle. And so it's another reason why you and I connect. But I'm curious, you mentioned high school, but why were you interested in autism in the first place?
when I was in high school, there was a family that was looking for volunteers, and as a part of everyone in my school, we always did some volunteering at that point, and they were looking for someone to come work in their home program for him. He was a beautiful boy, and he was about 5 years old, and a very child-centered program. We did amazing things with him, and I fell in love with this kid. I just fell in love with him. It was just a beautiful soul, and I worked with him for a few years. And then I went to college and I was doing my pre-vet stuff. And then a friend of mine said, "Oh, there's an upstate program, upstate New York, working with kids in the wilderness. There's a camp and we have cabins and teens, and you want to come work with us?" And I was like, "Okay, yeah, sure." So I went there, and it was an incredible experience. And we did things like whitewater canoeing. I mean, we had, group of teenage boys who were practically nonverbal, but we had them whitewater canoeing and camping and swimming in the lake and functioning and doing it. It was incredible. I did that for 3 summers, consecutive summers. At some point, I noticed that their stimming, their repetitive behaviors that often were associated with autism, would go decrease as they exercise more.
Yeah.
So I said that would be interesting to do a research project on. In my college, we did a thesis, an undergrad thesis, where we took a half year and researched. So I decided, instead of doing pre-vet, to learn more about things in that development and psychology and education, and I decided to do a thesis on checking how stimming and affects autism. So I went to the school, and it turned out to be what's called ABA these days. It was behavior modification back then, and it was totally opposite of everything I'd done with all these kids all those years. And I actually found it to be devastating. And I saw the child that I'd been working with. It was a different state, and he was much older, but the parents had somehow put him in the school, and he was unfortunately a mess. He'd become aggressive and frustrated, and then doing the same sort of things we were doing when he was 5 and I was a teen. And so I switched my thesis to educating autistic kids in a different way, more the natural things that I had been doing all those years, and not the typical ABA type behavior modification interventions. Wow. So that was how I got where I'm at.
Wow. For people who haven't met anyone who has autism or interacted, can you share what are some of the common behaviors?
Autism is a very, and now extremely broad spectrum disorder as it is. And if you look at it, the DSM, there's, social problems with social interactions, and there's a number of other criteria. I'm not going to get into DSM and diagnosis. Anyone can find that online.
Yeah.
But there are communication issues. And I think that the main thing that rules with almost all the autistic individuals that I have come across all the years are distorted and irregular sensory processing. And because of that, the way they tend to perceive the environment is different than the average person. I would say that most people see and feel and experience more or less what we expect to see and experience in our visual, auditory, and tactile fields. We're pretty much, brains filter out what we deem unnecessary or irrelevant. Let's say, so if you're having auditory issue, let's say if you're living on a busy street, you won't really hear the background noise until an ambulance goes by. Your brain filters, but with autistic or generally neurodivergent individuals, could be also with ADHD or other different types of neurodivergence, sometimes those filters don't work, or they work irregularly, and sometimes they're hypersensitive, hyposensitive, or both. And that can be like trip circuit breaker, let's say. So it's like a power surge. If it runs through the system, if there's too much power, then the system will trip a circuit breaker. So a human, it could be too much stimulation, which could cause a person to flap, jump, or do some sort of self-stimulating behavior to regulate that system. And then it's often accompanied by problems with eye contact, which I believe often is from the irregular visual stimuli. It can cause visual distortions, which can be disturbing, so it's easier not to look. Sometimes a person has to turn off some of the senses not to look at something in order to hear. And organization of the senses, and those things interfere with cognition, acquisition of language. Some people who are diagnosed autistic have very high language skills, but have difficulty with social cues, and some people need a lot of supports and in almost every area of life. So it's kind of a term that I personally have difficult with because I think it doesn't really give us a lot of information or how to help the person. Rather, I prefer to try and not even think about it as autistic or not autistic. Rather, what is difficult for this person and how we can help them improve their quality of life and help them learn and feel and interact the way they want to. And so I leave the terms aside a little bit. That's kind of my take on it. But everyone has their own take. Very not DSM, different and not lesser. And let's see how to accommodate. That's my. I don't look for a pathological version of what's going on.
So can you share a little bit of, it's very rare that somebody studies something and then actually has to interact with it in a very practical sense. And for you you've been doing this professionally, and then you mentioned you have a child with autism. And I'm just curious, how did you react to that? Were you like, thank God I have this background because now I'm prepared, or were you like, wow, I can't believe this is happening? Or both?
No, I was, thank God I had this background because if I did not, being that the common treatment for autism is ABA, and I 100% believe that ABA is severely traumatic and damaging. And I have been in so many settings where I've had 6, 7, 8, 10 professionals telling me that I am not okay because I refuse to do this with my child. And if I didn't have all of that background, and if I didn't see for all of those years how there are alternatives that are better, then I might just have been convinced. And if that had happened, my child could have turned out like that poor kid that I work with, and so many of the traumatized people I have seen and spoken to over the years. And if my child would have been that way, then we would have been that way, because if the person dealing with a child that is aggressive and frustrated, then their life becomes very difficult. So all around, I was lucky. I was so lucky.
Can you share some of those things that professionals would tell you to do that you were like, wait, there's an alternative and I'm not going to do that?
ABA basically treats everything like a behavioral problem, and they treat everything like behavior, stimulus and response, and reinforces the response by doing this, or if you don't like the person doing it, you might ignore it. But it's kind of like training. It's not teaching, it's training. And it's not training, or it's not connecting in the sense of meeting the child where they're at and then drawing them towards you because they want to connect with you, and teaching through that interaction. It's a scientific per se, which I don't agree with actually, but it's per se scientific for a treatment. And it's this repetitive demand response, stimuli response, teaching per se, meeting. It's teaching behavior and not meaning, and not looking at the underlying root, which is most likely sensory.
Right. So what would be your alternative to that?
Connecting with them where they're at, finding what interests them will motivate them, and then find a way through the thing that interests them to teach them what you want to teach them. So for example, my son was small. He was with his therapist, and he was very interested in pouring water. That's what he liked to do, pour water. So she got all different kinds of colors of soap, bubbles, and she would pour them into the water, and they would learn the colors, and then they would the heights and different kinds, shapes, sizes, and shapes of containers, and all these different, and fun, play, just fun. But she was able to teach him all the cognitive concepts that she wanted to teach him by the thing that he was interested in, and that not making the thing he was interested in be the prize for repeating it 10 times.
Right.
It was just a connection.
The starting point. Yeah.
That's interesting. That's a simple example.
Yeah.
It's not sitting, giving a person, put the piece of puzzle piece in the puzzle, and then I will give you a candy or a pat, or give you a minute on your iPad. That's like ABA type stuff, and that is
got it. Right. Okay.
Fundamental believe the person can't connect, and they can. They're having technical difficulty. Autism is like technical difficulties.
I like that.
Barrier.
Yeah.
But it's not that they don't want to be with other people or learn, and that's a very important thing to understand, that they can and are capable but you just have to find the right way to get around the technical
Yeah.
difficulties.
I like the technical difficulty. How that makes a lot of sense. So I learned something new when we talked, even though I was, I would say more educated than a lot of people in terms of neurodiversity and sensory and stuff. But I've never heard of Irlen Syndrome until we chatted. So I'm sure that 99% of the people listening to this won't know either, right? Is that a fair assumption?
I don't know percentage, but yes, a very large percentage of people will not have a clue about Irlen syndrome.
Yeah.
Named after Helen Irlen, who discovered that color can sort out visual distortions. Somehow our brain doesn't process white light efficiently, and that can cause visual disturbances or reading disturbances. It can look like ADHD. It can look like dyslexia. It often actually, if a person's diagnosed with ADHD or dyslexia, is likely they might have Irlen syndrome. And it is actually corrected by a simple colored lens, colored spectral filter. And 2 of my kids were diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia and had severe reading issues and things like issues with not being able to track a ball or depth perception. And the minute they put on colors lens, they started reading.
Wow.
It was like a miracle. One was in 11th grade and one was in 5th grade, and they had years of remedial instruction, and nothing helped. But the minute they had the technique, so the minute their visual field stabilized, they were able to read and learn.
It's amazing.
And I had very severe visual disturbances after my surgery. When I woke up, my visual field was completely insane. People's faces would melt. I would walk down the road and the sidewalk would go up. I'd see light bulbs dancing across the ceiling. Every light post had halos coming out of it. Stairwells would give me vertigo. I couldn't ride in a car. I was really severely disabled for about 4 years. And the minute I put a colored lens on, it disappeared.
Wow. So why do you think we don't know about this?
It's very easy. Medical communities, professionals don't like things you can't measure. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Irlen syndrome, or let's say something like auditory processing, which is kind of Irlen syndrome for the auditory channel. Okay. Yeah. They're not measured in numbers or decibels or things like that. The mechanics of the eye are normal. So the eye doctor is not going to pick that up. And the neurologists can't see it. So why should the neurologist believe it? So they tend to poo-poo it. And I can tell you that I've been to neurologists and neuro-ophthalmologists and ophthalmologists, and I don't even know how many doctors I went to, but also with my kids, and not one of them suggested that I check for Irlen syndrome. And when I told them, I took my kids to them, and they said, wow, what a dramatic, wow, it's not dyslexia. It just looked like dyslexia. Some people have Irlen and dyslexia together, but it might be a misdiagnosis. Or the ADHD, suddenly the visual field is stabilized and they suddenly are paying attention in class. And they say, well, that's incredible, but they never took it the next step of doing something about it. And the same goes with all school officials. You can't measure it, let's ignore it, subjective, which is crazy, but that's what it is. Yeah. So nobody, and drug, companies are not going to like something that a simple colored lens will fix. Take away the years of Ritalin. So, no one's.
How did you find out about it?
I actually heard about it when I was in college. I read a book by Donna Williams, who was an autistic woman, and she said she never could see a person's entire complete face without her Irlen lenses. Wow. But I didn't think much of it. And then when I was a number of years ago, when my kid was in 11th grade and another was in 5th grade, and they're having all these reading issues, and a friend of mine actually clipped a newspaper article. Somebody did an article about it, and she said, what do you think of this? And then I remembered, I read about that all these years ago. Well, nothing's helping my kids, and it's thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars and hours of remedial instruction, and they were depressed, and they were thought of as lazy when they weren't, because they just things were moving around. Yeah. That we didn't know that until they actually got tested. And that's an interesting point that's very important to understand. A person who has Irlen syndrome will not tell you there's something wrong with the visual field, because that's their normal. They don't know there's a problem until it's stabilized, and then they realize that there was a problem. Wow. So they're not going to tell you that that's a problem. And even if they
That's
did
such a good
tell you,
point.
no one's going to know what to do about it. Like I was looking for an answer, no one could tell me, right? So
Wow.
nobody sent them for the test.
When I was little, I remember sitting in like Chumash class and trying to read, and I was having a very hard time. And I went to
Mhm.
an eye doctor, just my yearly checkup, and he was like, "Girl, you're seeing double." I'm like, "What do you
Yeah,
mean? I'm not supposed to see two of everything?" I had no
exactly.
idea.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, for me, it was just regular contact or glasses, but how are you supposed to know if it's exactly what you're saying? It's so difficult.
It's when you go into an alien assessment, and the first thing that the assessor will say to you when he puts a page in front of you is say, "What do you see?"
Yeah.
And oh my, suddenly things are moving. Suddenly the page turns color. Suddenly,
It's just
after
asking the
five
right
minutes of
question.
reading, they script the thing. Yeah. What do
Yeah.
you see?
Yeah.
Didactic assessment or psychodidactic assessment will not ask you that question, nor will they offer you a solution.
Wow.
Only an Irlen assessment will find that, but it gave us our lives back.
It's pretty amazing, and I'm glad you're sharing this for more people to even to just know about. If somebody in their life is dealing with something, they can always
I'd say if any kid is reading slowly in first or second grade, and they start
get
reading
tested.
slowly, get them tested for Irlen, because you could save all those years of misery,
Yeah.
and other
Wow.
kids picking on them and not being able to play soccer because they
Yeah.
can't follow the ball and all that other stuff.
Wow. Okay, so if let's say this was the end of our podcast, I would say people would be pretty amazed at the things that you've had to go through, but it's not. You got diagnosed with a brain tumor. And I'm curious what led up to your diagnosis? Like what made you think to go check? Or were you had no idea and it was a random?
I was lucky. Well, first of all, I kind of felt like a car running out of gas. I was just, something was wrong and I couldn't figure out what was wrong. I was just
Wow.
tired. I was just,
Yeah.
that was it, like a car running out of gas. It's like,
Yeah.
and I had a lot of excuses why that would be happening. My day would start at 6 in the morning. I'd get kids ready to take them to school, drive to Jerusalem, which is like 2 hours away from where I live,
Wow.
take my kid to treatments, come back just in time to pick up the other kids from school, then make them lunch, and then go, take care
Yeah.
of kids all afternoon, and then get them to bed, and then start working, freelance writing, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of reasons to be tired because,
Yeah.
6 hours of sleep, but I just felt something was wrong.
Yeah.
Something was wrong. And I kept going to doctors, and my blood work, everything was perfect. But then I started getting hearing issues, and that was what's probably saved my life, actually, is that the tumor had grown. It's probably been with me 10, 15 years, they say, and
Really?
it went into my left ear canal. And then I started feeling like I couldn't understand what people were saying, and my hearing tested normal range, but I was not understanding. So it's like developed severe auditory processing problem in one of my ears. And because of the irregularity, my ENT sent me to a MRI, and in the MRI, they discovered a whopping 5 centimeter round
Oh my God.
tumor on my brain stem, which is a very small part of your brain on the bottom, and all the central nerves run through it, and the nerves
Oh
are
my God.
entangled in it, and it was a big, huge for that part of the brain tumor. And within a few weeks, I was already in surgery. It's very dangerous. My dog is bothering me. Go, listen.
I hope I never experience anything like that, and I hope I don't
I
know
hope you do.
anyone that
I
does.
hope you never know. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm just curious, how does a person react to something like that? How did you react to something like that?
Well, it's really difficult, especially because I had some people very close to me that I love very much that had died of brain cancer.
Oh,
Uh,
that's scary.
my father's cousin passed away, and I was with him. Yeah, so I was like, oh no, not brain
Yeah.
cancer, please no, please no.
Yeah.
And I was only after they operated that I could be sure that it wasn't, and thank God it wasn't. But so that was terrifying. And the other thing was that thank God, I have 5 children,
Yeah.
and one, my son was autistic and needing significant support, and other kids with challenges that needed support. And the thought of saying goodbye to them and not having their mommy there to take care of them was very, 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 very difficult. Uh, Having to say goodbye, when I went to the hospital, I just said, let me try and say something to each one of them that they'll remember, hopefully, that they can take with them if I don't wake up from the surgery, because it was very much a may or may not wake up from the surgery.
Oh my gosh.
So that was very difficult.
Oh my gosh.
But
I have
faith and prayer
yeah.
got me through that.
Wow. So you do the surgery and
Mhm.
then you wake up and your life pretty much changes, right?
Completely.
Completely. Can you share, I want to ask you about, of course, the couple of months and years after, but what was day one like waking up? So first of all, you said you didn't know if you're going to wake up. So what was it like? Okay, I woke up.
I did. I woke up in the ICU. I'll never forget the voice of the nurse who was talking. Had this really, really, really deep voice. I'm like, okay. But my senses were really distorted, and the lights and then beeping, and I fortunately was so out of it when I first woke up that I didn't know I was intubated. By the time I came to my senses, I already had the tube out, which is good, because I don't think I would have dealt with that very well. Um, but just trying to realize, like, okay, where am I? What happened? And pain, incredible pain. The surgeon told me I feel like I got hit by a train, more or less, and he didn't lie, and he didn't exaggerate. It was horrible pain. It was beyond anything I'd ever experienced. So, and then I realized that, oh no, I can't talk, and oh, I can't really swallow either. And like they'd bring me this tray with something to try and eat, and it had like an apple, and I had a thing of Jello, and I'm
Yeah,
looking,
the hospital
no
food.
way. I said, just try the apple. I'm like, no, I don't. I realized I can't swallow,
Wow.
because I have still to date. I'm 12 years now. On Yom HaShoah, on Holocaust Memorial Day, it was 12 years since my surgery. That's
Wow.
a day.
Well,
I have two birthdays.
congratulations.
Thank you. Two birthdays, the one I was born on and then the one
Wow.
I woke up after. But then I realized that I can only have liquid because there's a dead area in my throat. It is better than it was, and I've learned to eat, but I have to be careful.
Yeah. Did they tell you to expect this stuff?
I
Any
did
of
know
the
that I
stuff
might
you...
have. I
Okay.
did know that I might have problems swallowing.
Okay.
And that was one of the things I'm most concerned about, because if the nerve had completely had to be severed, then I wouldn't be able to talk or swallow. And that was one of the things I signed off on. I might die. I might be completely
Wow.
paralyzed. I might not be able to swallow. I had a long list of things. And it's like, all right, you either sign it or you don't go and then you die. So it was like, I might die or I definitely die. So it was,
Right.
I didn't have
Not
much of a
great
choice.
choices.
When I got to the entrance of the surgery, and the doctors weren't very wonderful with their bedside manner. I was wheeled to the entrance to the room, and it's freezing in there, and I'm in my gown and my butt sticking out, and they're saying, so we'll turn her over and we'll operate in prone, and they're having this whole conversation, and I'm like
Oh my
listening to them.
gosh.
They didn't wait till I went to sleep. They had to talk about how they're going to screw my head into the
Oh my god.
I just looked at them. I just, okay. I said as loud as I could. I said, Shema. Loud as I could. And they all shut up.
Yeah.
I just said, Shema. And they waited till I finished. And then they went about their business and forgot,
Wow.
but I
Very
was like,
clever of you.
that's the only thing I could do at that point. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'm in your hands. You want me to come out of this? I'll come out of this. And no, there's nothing left to do but that.
Wow. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. There's not many people that can share emotions like that. I think it's a very unique position to be in, and I'm so grateful that you made it and that you're willing to share your story.
Thank you.
Yeah, your book very much discusses, you have your diary notes basically in there of your recovery period, right? But can you give us the short version of what your long recovery process looked like?
I had to learn to do everything all over again. Walk, talk, eat. I had to plan how I'm going to take the few steps to go pee. From the couch to the bathroom was about 4 steps, and I'd plan that for a good half hour. to do that.
Wow.
It was really, really difficult, especially because my two younger kids were, one of them was in kindergarten and one was in first grade.
The babies.
And and they need mommy to take care of them, and
Yeah.
mommy doesn't know how to get off the couch. So that was quite a lesson in having a messy house and being stuck there. I couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Trying to run a household from the couch, it was beyond a big challenge.
Can I ask you about that? How do you're very, it seems, ambitious, and you seem hardworking. How does someone like that deal with not having control over really anything?
I was like a superwoman. I was running from the morning to the morning. I mean, that
Yeah.
was me. Honestly, got whopped over the head. Just whopped over the head, literally.
Yeah.
Had to deal with that.
Because I think I'll
You
just
learn to let go. I don't know what other people do, but I had options that I could become frustrated and bitter. And then so not only would I have not my physical body left, but then I would also not have my emotional body left or my
Right.
relationships left. So that's not a good way to go. I mean, I had to work really hard, and once I got my Irlen lenses, that they really saved my life. Like, I have good days and I have bad days, but really, I think what helps me is to understand. And this is a lesson I actually thought of as raising a parent. When my son said "mommy" the first time on his own when he was 5, I thought I learned the lesson of never taking anything for granted and appreciating everything. And that's a gift earned through challenge, but it's a big gift. I thought I really learned that lesson with him. And when I had to go through what I went through, I realized I still had more to learn.
Wow.
And I'll tell you that every night before I go to bed, I say thank you for all the things I've been able to do. And oftentimes it's to date through challenge and pain. And I can't do everything I want to do, and if I go to Jerusalem, something, I know it's going to take me 3 days to recover my vestibular system.
Yeah.
But if I was able to do that, then it was worth it because I wanted to. So it's appreciating how many gifts we have and every single thing we can do. We say Birkot HaShachar, the morning prayers, and all those blessings we say at the beginning. They shouldn't be automatic. They are, if you can open your eyes and get out of bed and stand and talk and walk and swallow and hug somebody you love, you have won the lottery.
Wow.
And that is what I learned. And that is really what helps when times are difficult, to say that every night, to think about all those things we can do that we often take for granted.
Yeah.
Because nothing is for granted.
I'm going to quote you. That really encompasses my question about control and not being able to do the things that you once so easily did. You wrote, "Once again, I found myself in a situation where there was a huge abyss between what I desired to do and what I thought I could do and what I was actually capable of doing."
Yeah.
And first of all, beautifully written, but wow, because when you read your book, it's so clear. You're writing it because it's a diary. You can feel how almost stuck you are in your body, and you're like, because you're still the same Jacki in your mind.
Absolutely.
And it's like your body just won't cooperate with what you want to do.
I'm full steam ahead and my body's going backwards.
Yeah.
It happens to me today. A horrible thing is not trusting your body to do the things you want it to do.
Yeah.
And I was a very physical person. I mean, I like to hike and dance and climb trees and run after my kids. I was very physically active, and suddenly I can't trust my body to do squat.
Yeah.
Or if I want to do something, I need to plan it very well and know how long it's going to take me to recover after. And I would like to do so many things today, and I cannot do them, and I know I cannot do them. So it's always this letting go, and then I make a mistake sometimes, and I do a little bit too much, and then I have to pay a price for it. And sometimes I know that's going to happen to me, and I do it anyway because I don't want to miss everything. Because it's hard. It's hard when you can't miss things.
Yeah. So you pick and choose.
Well, yeah. Or that I can't fly. When my mother passed away recently, and I could not go and see her. So things like that are very difficult.
Yeah.
But not trusting your body. People trust their bodies. It's part of
without even knowing, right? We take it so for granted.
And nothing is automatic.
Yeah.
And that makes me, I mean, my learning about that, certainly about autism, because I've seen so many autistic people, and I've observed my son, that, and I've read a lot about people saying these things as well, that they want to do something and their body does something else.
Yeah.
They think they can do something, or they give an order to their brain to do something, and their body just doesn't listen to them. And that's a dissonance that many people live with.
Yeah.
I don't wish it on anyone, but everything I can do, I'm thankful that I can.
It's amazing that you have this attitude, and I'm going to ask you about that in a second, but one of the way you end off, and I think it just speaks to who you are really, is you're telling your readers and yourself that the idea of not being your pain, right? The pain is not your identity. And I'm wondering, first of all, how did you learn that? It's very hard, I think, when it's really affecting your whole life, to separate it from, okay, this is not Jacki. This is something Jacki's experiencing. And I want to ask you if you can give advice to listeners who probably are not in a similar situation, but pain is, you can't compare pain, right? So anyone that is experiencing pain, how can they make sure that it doesn't become who they are?
Pain's an interesting thing, and chronic pain is definitely interesting things, and there are a lot of different ways of coping with chronic pain now. Many times chronic pain comes from the fact that we have overthinking or busy thinking, okay, or fear of pain, or like very, very busy thinking, and that will get our bodies all revved up, and that will trigger the fight, flight, freeze reaction, release those chemicals, and those chemicals will then prepare our body for conflict, whatever it may be, and therefore it will reduce blood flow to the extremities, and that will cause very severe muscle contractions, and that is pain. So the more you think, and the very real pain and very nasty pain too.
Yeah.
But if you learn that your brain is playing tricks on you and that it doesn't have to hurt, that your body is just producing pain, and just realizing that and saying to you, what are you doing? That awareness can make a lot of pain go away. Now, for me, I had chronic pain for what I thought was because of a disc, but when I read a book about Professor John Sarno many years ago, talked about this. He connected it to the rage, and then I read later another book about chronic pain by Hannah Studley, who talks about it more as busy thinking, which I relate to more than inner rage. By reading that and understanding that made the pain decrease incredibly. That's one part of it. So it's reducing the pain, or not my focus. The more we focus on pain, the more it's going to hurt. The more we're afraid of pain, the more it's going to hurt, because it's going to trigger all those things. But another thing is that if I have pain, and that's part of my life, and I do, it's much less than it was because of what I just explained. If I do bend down too much, I do have a brain leak, CSF, cerebrospinal fluid leak, and it does put pressure in my head, brain in my head, and things like that. So occasionally I deal with pain. That's not me. I'm not that pain. It's something I carry around with me. It's some baggage. It's something I need to make accommodations for so that I minimize it as much as possible, but I don't focus on it.
Yeah.
It's not what I want my life to be. I focus on other things. I tell my brain and my body, like, cut it out if it's from overthinking, and I get on with it. I just focus on doing something else, and usually it's doing good for some.
Yeah.
If I'm out of my head and out of my body and focus my energy on doing good for others, then that pain is not important. It is certainly not my identity. I just have to carry it with me sometimes.
Yeah. So beautiful.
It's much nicer life than letting my pain define me. Although I do need to make accommodations sometimes.
Right, and that's why I like that you brought this up, is because just because it's affecting your life in a lot of ways doesn't mean it's who you are as a person.
No. I'm the same person I always was. And again, people who have sensory problems, and I still do, they're not me. It's just my brain doing crazy stuff. So I say to my brain, it's not nice what you're doing, but I can't make it stop. I need to get to a quiet place, per se, if I'm an overload or meltdown, and I'll wait for my nervous system to calm down, my sensory system to calm down. And I really understand why a lot of autistic individuals melt down and tantrum and things like that, because if your sensory system is overwhelmed, you're going to do that because you're in seriously fight, flight, freeze mode. but it's not me. It's my technical difficulties.
Yeah, I still love that. So I'm gonna tie it back to the beginning of our conversation. How has your connection to Judaism and faith helped you get through all of this?
I don't think I would have gotten through all this without it.
Mm.
First of all, there are times that when one is faced with a tremendous challenge, sometimes you just get too tired and you just don't want to get on with it. You just don't want to get out of the bed. Just let me pull the cover over my head and the world go away. I've had enough. But if you have faith and you are religious, then you know that you always can do one more good deed. You can always do one more mitzvah, which means you can't sit in that bed and do nothing. You need to get your butt out of the bed and go think and do netilah and say your blessings and then see what good you can do, because that gives you strength, knowing that you can always do something. You have a purpose in life. And even if you become, like me, disabled, so I can't do a lot of things that I did before, but I can still do it. I can still do mitzvah and I can still create. I wrote my book from my bed,
Wow.
We need to find our mission, and sometimes our mission comes from a place of being disabled, but doesn't mean I still don't have a mission anymore. So that is all comes from faith. And I also have experienced the power of prayer. I know prayer works. I have felt it on my body. I have felt it when in the hospital, when I felt a cloud of energy go into my body and wake me up. And I said, what the heck was that? And then I hear that people were praying for me at that hour. It works. It's there. So I know that, and understanding also that things happen for a reason. And now that I experienced all these things that I've been witnessing all those years, I said, wait a minute. I mean, I wouldn't recommend it to anybody, right? It's your sport, but being that it happened to me and being I must have happened for a reason. So what can I do with this? What good can I do with this? And that's why I wrote the book and launched a blog. And I've been linking up with people from all over the world the last few years and talking in any forum that will let me talk to help other people, because I had to go through all this to understand it, but now I can help people with it.
Yeah.
So that's all comes from faith.
I just find it so fascinating that when I asked you about, like, when did you connect to Judaism more, and you said, I realize nothing happens for a reason, and I'm just thinking, like, how amazing is it that you connected to Judaism and faith before all this happened, so that it can help you get through all of this.
Oh yeah,
it's pretty
unbelievable. I don't know if I would have been able to go through what I went through without it.
Wow.
And even if it hadn't happened, I don't know how long I would. Life before and life after is two totally different worlds.
Yeah. So, Jacki, I feel like I could talk to you forever, honestly. But I think the listeners are going to have to read your book if they want to learn more. But I want to ask you something that I ask all my guests, and it's, what does being a trailblazer mean to you?
Well, that's a hard question for me to answer.
Really?
It is. I think having the ability to identify your mission, figure out what it is, and then go and do it.
Yeah.
And not give a hoot.
Yeah.
It doesn't sit with anybody. To go against the mainstream if I need to go speak out my truth. And especially when I say things like ABA and all that other stuff, a lot of people that can get like,
yeah,
it's a brave thing. So many times people say it about, you're brave. Yeah. I just stated my truth. And I think that maybe to bring that truth to your work and not be afraid.
Yeah.
And to go full steam ahead in what you believe in from where you're at. I think perhaps that's the answer. Yeah,
that's a beautiful answer. And I would just say to that you make it sound so simple that you just do what you think is right. But that is literally definition of bravery, in my opinion, because I think nowadays it's so hard to do that because there's so much noise. It's hard to figure out, where do I stand amongst all of these people telling me how I should be, especially with social media. So I think it's not mutually exclusive. I think you're brave because of it. And I want to tell you how I read your book, but listening to your story, I literally almost cried a few times. I'm in awe of you. I'm in awe of, like, the way
Nothing
you've.
to be in awe of. I'm just a
No, no,
person
I
doing
am.
my shlichut here. There is no
No,
awe
but
here.
not everyone in your position would. So thank you for your strength, and thanks for sharing your pain and strength. I think it goes hand in hand. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. And if
Thank you
there's one
so
more
much.
thing I'd like to say for everyone, I think that we're all here in this world, going through what I went through, is to think about our purpose in life and the general purpose in life. And I think that really it all boils down to bringing good, bringing light into the
Yeah.
world, and helping others. And if we can do that, then we're achieving our goal, everyone in their own specific way.
Yeah.
So
Thank you
I
so
think that's what
much.
it's all about.
Thank you.
Thank you.